bombs away. One's going to climb high above 20. Drift out.
Eagle 6 radar contact. Eagle 6 is visual.
Planet goes left.
Hello and welcome back to the DCS SITREP, where we discuss news and information about the world's premier combat flight simulator for the home PC, DCS World. I'm your host, Prickly Hedgehog, and today we look at some very exciting news from Eagle Dynamics and the long-running work they've been doing on the dynamic campaign, which the community has been asking about for a long time. And we also hear from Polychop, who made a major announcement about their commitment to both the Kiowa project that they're working on and the ongoing upgrades to their DCS Gazelle module. Let's begin, though, with the ED-specific news and their in-house dynamic campaign engine known as DCS DC, or DCS Dynamic Campaign. In a recent interview with CEO Nick Gray, you'll recall we learned that ED has been working on this for many, many years, and they have struggled to some degree with the scale and complexity of that particular project. It was a little bit more than what they expected it to be, was the sort of overall theme from Nick Gray. They have a talented team, a small team working on it, and this has been going on, according to the newsletter, since 2018, which is good news. He said, yeah, it's a small team, but they are highly, highly talented people, which makes up for lack of numbers. Now, in today's newsletter, the team indicated that the system will allow players both single and multiplayer. Really cool cue there. It's not just for single players. This will allow them to create their own dynamic, non-scripted campaigns that will evolve based on strategic and AI decisions, indirect player influences on AI action, and also direct player influences on the battlefield. So it's going to be, therefore, a dynamic campaign, and our input or lack of input will have a bearing on the outcome of the campaign. That's the nuts and bolts of that. So they hope to add a new standard in dynamic campaign design, they say, with a high level of interaction, authenticity, and immersion, as well as ease of use. So they're covering a lot of aspects there, things that we expect from dynamic campaigns. And obviously there are some from history, if you like, that have set the benchmark for dynamic campaigns in combat simulation, air combat simulation. So they outlined some of the focus in developing the system over the last few years. In 2022, they said the focus was on the creation and testing of general air operations tasks. In 2023, they were focused on ground operations. They believe that area of ground operations will break new ground for dynamic campaigns and includes some of the following things. Bear with me. The creation of a realistic road network system that is based on a new road editor system that they've created. This allows units to have appropriate road movement conditions that are tied to the logistics and supply network. They also this also integrates apparently into the movement of ground unit formations. So to have that, a new ground unit formations editor was also created that allows for the accurate assembly of units based levels of command from platoon up to division, with all command levels in between. Command structures vary based on the country and era, so I wonder if that's also going to influence some of the tactics, just like the real world, and with correct terminology. Unit formations then operate realistically within their larger force structure based on tasking such as road march, meeting engagement, assault, defense, retreat, and I guess route picking, etc., etc. So the team said they addressed ground forces behavior once it was engaged, and this was one of the biggest and most complex tasks. So you don't want a bunch of suiciding AI units. Much of some of the stuff we've seen in Ukraine, for example, some of the Russian tactics. Much of this was dependent upon force tasking, support from neighboring forces, organization of frontline forces, and logistics, such as munitions and fuel, and disposition of enemy forces. So there's a lot to unpack there, a lot of very complex programming. Now, to assist with these items, a new and improved pathfinding mechanism was developed that considers both the terrain topography and restrictive zones within it. So that's an interesting concept that they've had to come up with there. And this allows more sensible routing of formations based on the terrain properties. In addition to ground operations tasks, they are continuing to work on the air operations related tasks. For instance, one of the issues they ran into was that many airfields currently have too few parking spaces available for a large dynamic campaign. They don't want to be limited to such numbers or limited numbers for large scenarios. So to address that, they have developed a new process to expand the spawn points for aircraft. That's really interesting. So next, they are apparently going to finalize ground tasking and increase the level of internal and external testing and begin work on the important graphic user interface or GUI system, so that allows us to interact with the program, the game. So lots and lots of information in there, lots of really complex program that's been summated there. What are the takeaways from this? I guess the first question people are going to ask is, well, when is it going to be released? After all these years, you've been working on it since 2018. Remember, too, that Nick Gray said that there were some major updates with machine learning and AI, which has improved significantly in the last 12 to 24 months, which has helped them out quite a bit. But the bottom line is we don't know when this is going to be introduced in the game. We also don't know if it's going to be a pay-for project or module. So, like a DLC with a small fee. We've kind of seen some of this with AI assets. So I imagine that there'll be some sort of fee attached to this, because I can't see how they could justify not in terms of, the financial reward for the amount of energy that's been put into it. I'm surely they'll want to recoup some of that expense. So I can see plurality of design at both a macro level and a micro level in terms of the AI assets logic as they describe. Some really interesting detail there, and therefore, as I said before, some pretty complex programming, and it's going to be interesting to see how that operates, because I think one thing might be, even if you have different countries operating, do they operate the same if they're under a NATO umbrella, for example, if there's an overall command? So there's lots of interesting, when you start peering back what's there, it raises some interesting questions. One thing I would be cautious of, it sounds to me that this logic that they've created for AI is quite a bit different than the current AI logic. So I wouldn't use what we currently have in game as a benchmark for what they have plugged for this dynamic campaign. This is clearly something different, something that they've, again, like I said, spent a lot of time and energy shaping and producing to overcome some of the issues that they currently have with the AI logic. Nothing there on whether we are going to have new ATC logic, and I know that they were doing a lot of recording of voices for that to improve that whole thing. That was something that came up in a discussion, I think, with Simon Pearson 2 or 3 years ago. So there's still a lot of questions that we have about how this is going to work. I think the bottom line, though, is that the fact that it's going out into external testing is a big indication that they've made a lot of progress. Otherwise, you wouldn't want to have external testers looking at it at all. You'd still be, in these early phases of producing. So I think it's a plus overall. I think, we still have to build this graphical user interface, which is important. It needs to be the face of the dynamic campaign. It'll need to be easy to operate and interface with, which they've promised it will be, and it also needs to look pretty as well. But compared to the overall development that's going on, the core programming logic that they describe, I think the GUI is basically fluff. The meat and bones of the program is where they've spent and invested a lot of energy, it seems. And I like the fact that they have done that, and I like the fact that they've continued to ensure that it is a system that supports both single and multiplayer gameplay, and that makes it an attractive prospect and an attractive program across the player base. I think it will have broad appeal, and I think they're right. I agree. I think it is one of the more important things that they need to produce for DCS World. And if they get it right, if it is groundbreaking like they promised, I hope it is. I wish them all the best in this. I think it'll be a massive game changer for a lot of people, and I think it will drag in a lot of players looking for areas where they don't want to have to create their own fun, which is what Nick Gray talked about. You have to create your own sort of destiny a little bit in this game because it is such an open sandbox in many respects. And I think this is going to solve a lot of those issues that some players find where boredom creeps in, etc., etc. What it means for our dynamic campaign compared to the linear campaigns that we have for campaign makers is anyone's guess. I think those will still be popular. because they provide a different sort of game experience where people are looking for more of a story and a more immersive aspect in that limited capacity. But yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how those two spheres interact. I thought it was interesting timing to the release because, as most of you will be aware, there are other dynamic campaign designs out there as community mods, etc., and I forget the name of the one off the top of my head that I had, but the most recent community mod, if you like, for not so much a dynamic campaign, but it provided an RTS type of gaming experience for multiplayer service, and this was Olympus. And it basically allows somebody within the program to be the game master. And so turn the server action to more of this RTS type of gaming experience where you can have control over the battlefield in a live capacity, real-time control. And then you can set up mission sets as desired, and you can create your own triggers and all those kinds of things. It's a pretty impressive looking program. The team talked to Casmo about what they were working on prior to the release. I think there was a release video last week. So yeah, hats off to those guys. It looks really interesting. It's a powerful tool for cooperative gameplay, that's for sure. It is available for download right now. I'll post a link in the description below so you can see the video for the Olympus release if you're curious about that and what it kind of means. Again, another form of gameplay for those people that love multiplayer. But are looking to set up scenarios but want more control over those scenarios, and I think it's a very, very clever product. I hope ED's paying attention to those kinds of things because we have a tremendous number of talented people in the community producing some really interesting things. So as for the ED dynamic campaign progress, well, we'll have to wait and see what 2024 brings. Let me know what you think about that in the comment section below.
Make 2, your bandit 080 31 35,000, Meg 1.
Now, not covered in this week's newsletter was the major announcement from Polychop that many players have been praying for. Good news. No, the Kiowa is not vaporware. Shame on you for thinking so if you're one of those people. Although I totally get it. The module and the company were very, very quiet about what was going on. And there just wasn't any information. And we've seen videos, I don't think they've produced a video for a while up until just this week, where Burundus was doing a lot of stuff, videos showcasing the helicopter, some history behind it, some of the mechanics, some of the flight modeling and all that kind of stuff. Looked really promising. But it's been quiet on that front for quite a while. Now this all came about apparently because of their lead engineer, who sadly had it sounds like some pretty major health issues, and basically left the team. And they were able to hire 2 new engineers, and they were able to get back into the business of bringing the aircraft's pipeline progress back on track. And the good news, it wasn't just like a couple of high-res shots or 2 either. The team confirmed that there is light at the end of the tunnel, and they are approaching the end of the tunnel fast, and they produced a couple of videos over the last week as well, just to highlight some of that. So part of the process, they said, involved the overhaul or essentially the rewriting of existing code, touch-ups to artwork, and some new features added, such as the level 2 manned-unmanned system, and overhaul of the control display subsystem, the optical display assembly, and the pilot display unit, and also the improved data modem. So quite a lot of interesting systems there. Now, most importantly of all, the module was sent to ED for model tests, which it has passed. Now, this is, again, a critical litmus test for any module in DCS world, and we've seen delays in the past where modules haven't come up to muster, including, for example, ED's own modules. A few years ago, it was the Mosquito. Nick Gray kind of sent that back to whence it came and said, no, do better next time, not acceptable. And also the Supercarrier, which I think Kate Perodurko, basically there was an issue with it in multiplayer, if I remember rightly. So they hummed and hawed about releasing it, and then they decided, no, it's not satisfactory. And so that was delayed, much to the community's annoyance at the time. So yeah, it is a really important litmus test, like I said. So the fact that it's been approved, it's passed, that's a really good sign for the development process. Now, speaking of that, you may have seen, like I said, it wasn't just a couple of high-res pictures. that have been touched up on Photoshop or anything like that. They actually produced a recent video, which I published, or at least put on my community tab, and that featured the Kiowa crew member in the left-hand seat taking a rifle off its mount and then shooting at a vehicle out of the open door, which is something we've not really seen before. Certainly not, at least from the front seat, with a handheld rifle rather than a mounted system like you see in some of the other aircraft. That was really, really cool. It looks like it's able to be used with VR gloves, essentially. So really, really neat touch. Again, another third-party developer showing us something that we haven't seen before, and I love it. Now, the delay, while it has been disappointing, I think in some ways it's probably provided Polychop with several little silver linings and what was apparently a pretty dark cloud, I guess, for them. And firstly, we have seen the growth in peripheral equipment from hardware makers like WinWing and Virpol in the last few years, especially during and post-COVID. And this has made it much more easy and attractive to fly helicopters with dedicated collectives and cyclics. These things are now available for us and interact with DCS modules. So helicopters themselves, particularly I think with the release of the Apache and the Hind, among others, they're no longer just a niche option within the DCS community. And we're seeing this with the like I said, with the hardware accompanying specific modules in DCS and also in Microsoft Flight Simulator. So there's a real advantage in having this equipment now for players wanting to enjoy the benefits, if you like, or enjoy a module a little bit better. And secondly, they don't have to compete directly with the highly popular Apache. It's been out long enough now that if the module had been ready earlier, I think it would have been challenging to figure out when do you insert what is a pretty popular module, when do you insert that on the back end of another really popular module like the Apache, like the F-15E, and of course with the Phantom F4E coming up too, they're going to have to manage that release carefully again as well. There's only so many modules that you want to release around each other or lose sales. So I think it would have been tough to plonk anywhere near the first year of the Apache's release, certainly at least 6 months. I think lastly here, the game engine has matured dramatically in basically the last 12 months, especially with 2.9, and that really does help support flying high detailed modules at low level. With most of the late model gaming rigs that we have now and a few others beside, ED's game engine supports high fidelity modules a lot better, especially as I said in that low level environment. And so that makes the module accessible, I think, to a broader player base looking to enjoy, again, some low level HAL. So while we wait for the final announcement on early purchase, on early access release dates, the team advised that they have been able to inject improvements to the Gazelle module that they have in the game. And this is going to occur concurrently rather than being relegated to a separate pipeline. That is also great news. So we're seeing some updates to that particular module, which I think is a neat one. It was long overdue for some fresh injection of more detail, and they are going to improve the flight model too, which they've already started doing. So really, really good news. I think some of the more exciting news we've had from Polychop in a long, long time, and I'm really pleased for them. And it's really nice to be able to finally answer community questions, which I regularly get about updates on what the team is doing. And most of you only know as much as what I do. So it breathes life, I think, new life, not only into the Kiowa module, which is fantastic, but also injects new life into the Gazelle as well. So improvements in this module have been great. I'm looking forward to more, like I said, with the refinement of the flight module, as well as the other visual tweaks that we have planned. So it's really, really cool. Okay, so this pretty much wraps up some of the major news this week as we march into 2024 here, which is just knocking on the door around the corner here. Edie reminded us that the eShop sale continues on through to January 7th, so pick up those bargains. Don't pay full price for modules. Remember, you can combine your savings with campaigns and maps and modules and really get the best out of the game that way. Also, there was a small patch this week which included the addition of Reflected Simulation's latest campaign for the P-51D Mustang, Dibden Eagles. If you haven't checked out my interview with Reflected, it's about an hour long. We did that about a week or so ago. Fantastic interview. Really enjoyed talking to him, and he revealed a whole lot of other interesting things that he's working on outside of the latest campaign that he's doing. So go check it out. It's worth listening to. Heat Blur introduced the model for the F-14 TARPS pod. The inner workings aren't quite ready yet, unfortunately, as well as the boarding ladder for the F-14 static and AI aircraft. For some reason, I have my letters reversed here, so I apologize. My notes need correcting. And I'll refer you to the changelog for more specific information about that little patch. I did get a kick out, actually, of the missile for the KA-50, which, one of the missiles at least, which if you shot it without a target, apparently it circled back and went after the host aircraft. So that's been fixed, so it now flies off into oblivion. But yeah, for some reason that was delightfully entertaining to me. It's my lack of maturity here. So yeah, quite a list of changes and updates for this week. Just a small patch though. So I don't know about you. One of the things that I've noticed a lot lately is a large number of short videos and images being used by ED of the MiG-29 of late. I'm not quite sure if they're trying to send us messages here. Remember that aircraft was touted a few years ago as one of their next full fidelity Red Air projects, and then information and talk about that sort of fizzled out completely. So we'll have to wait and see what materializes, or if this is just coincidence. Keep your eyes peeled, because that would be a very popular module and another one of those red aircraft that people are excited to have in the game. We want more Red Air. On that basis, we've seen a couple of images from Razbam on the Super Tucano. They threw out something the other day, and also that MiG-23 is in their stable as well. These are still early, I think, in development. We'll have to wait to see how the years progress, if you like, for more information on that. Okay, well, that's it for this week's DCS SITREP. Congrats to Kimmy's Kitchen and Garden for winning the F-15E prize. Nice to see some diversity in my viewership. Never really sure just exactly how many different types of people are viewing from all over the world, which I really appreciate. So thanks to all of you for entering. I appreciate the likes, the shares, the comments, and the discussions. Of course, the subscriptions. It helps keep the channel chugging along for news and information. And if you want to keep hearing news and information and other videos that we're doing on this channel, keep doing what you're doing with the likes and subscribes and the comments and all the rest of it. We'll see you next time on the DCS SITREP. Happy New Year, everybody. We'll see you next time. See you!
Make 4, band 8045, 15, 6000, make 4.
First target 53 DME 6000, nose away.
Estimate 2 contacts there.